So we're going to talk about pressing needs and gaps for startups and innovators here in Dubai and the UAE. And I want to focus on three main points, which I think you'll all agree are key to this whole ecosystem, if you will. The first is funding, and the second is finding talent, and then the third, I'd like to talk about the whole startup ecosystem as it exists here today. And of course, if we still have time in our allocated 30 minutes, we can add other points to it as well. So let's start with funding, and my thoughts, my initial thoughts on this are that it's obviously challenging for small companies, and particularly for startups. There's no way you can go into a bank. You won't even be let in through the front door. There doesn't seem to be a mature, or maybe I'm wrong, funding apparatus in place. And I'd like to understand a little bit more from my panelists, my fellow panelists, about the role of accelerators and incubators. How do you support the growth of startups? How do you bring in seed capital to get them going in the first place? So let me start with Rebecca, if I would. Could you say a few words on what you think about funding here?
Yes. My name is Rebecca Meelink. I founded Alphabet Capital Advisors in 2003, focusing on raising capital from institutional investors, mainly from family offices right to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and have spent my whole career, 25 years, always interfacing with investors. And it's a challenge, fundraising. Before 2008, you would go on a roadshow and meet investors and always come back with money. After 2008, that changed. Investors became more fussy, they became more due diligence orientated. So in the early days, you would only go to the investors in your own home country. That changed over the years. Now you really need to go across the globe to find investors. It's a marathon. So if startups are out there thinking they're going to raise money within a week, that just isn't going to happen, which is fine. That's actually a great message to hear if you've been out there and haven't yet raised the money. It's a process, and there's also a psychological element to it. Investors need to see you a couple of times, and generally I find over the years the psychological period is around 3 months for an investor to get comfortable with you. So don't try to sell him the whole story on day one and go deep into the technology. Try to get your high-level pitch across, your enthusiasm, and then find a hook to get him back again for a second meeting.
Thank you, Rebecca. Pelin, do you have something to add to that?
Thank you. We are an accelerator program, so in this regard, we are bridging the gap between like the very early stage to the VC stage. We are accelerators, so we are giving seed funding to startups. And we believe that we are closing the huge part because most of the times if you're a startup and you're in an incubator, you have an idea and you're about to make your prototype, but then you need more funding to be able to get your product into market and you need more support. And when we come into place, we are not only giving them the seed stage money, seed funding, but also opening all our mentor network and partner networks. In Dubai, our Startup Bootcamp program is focused on Smart City vertical, and RIT University is one of our program partners. We also have partners from government as well as the corporates, which is very important as well. The government side, we have Dubai Silicon Oasis Authority, we have Smart Dubai, Dubai Chamber, and on the corporate side, we have Visa, Orange Business Services, and Du Telecom. So when you look through this approach and the way that we operate, we bring together corporates, governments, and also universities like RIT University to provide all the necessary tools for our startups. Because even if you give them the money, what they need beyond money is your network and the help of mentorship. Like it's from corporates, it's from government, it's from universities. So we find our role like very important, but also we need more support for startups when they are graduating from us and they are looking for VC money. And this is also another bottleneck that when they are graduated, if they are not funded for 3 months to 6 months, then at some point they die. We are lucky as an accelerator program. We are right now in more than 20 cities around the world, and 70% of our alumni, they are active. So 30%, they die on the way. We were established in 2010, so you can imagine the math of this. But it's very important. Funding is crucial because even if you have an amazing talent, amazing team with experience, if they don't have funding, especially for those who are capital-intensive work, business, then they die on the way. So it's really important.
Yeah. I would like to add a few points with reference to the perspective of a university. We have been operating a technology business incubator and entrepreneurship development center as a part of the university ecosystem for about 7 years. And what is it we have done is create a corpus consisting of 50% participatory funding from university and remaining 50% coming from the government. And initially it started as a small fund, now it's up to the extent of almost $10 million. And fundamentally what is that we have done is we have ingrained the system of entrepreneurship development into the curriculum, identify that small percentage of students who want to create, who have startup ambition or aspiration right in the second year of their undergraduate programs, push them into the project-based or problem-based solving models, and align them with the national initiatives connected with either cleanliness or smart city programs. And then once they're able to demonstrate their experience and expertise in that particular field, connect them with the real world seed funders and angel investors. And that has led to about 20 plus startups in our university ecosystem. And we are able to see the sustenance in this particular model.
Thank you very much. So if a startup is unable to connect to a potential investor, then he or she has to resort to family and friends, or maybe some high net worth individuals who are extremely risk averse, have a very low risk tolerance. So what happens? Then it dies? Does it die? Does the thought, the idea, that's the initial germination of this idea, does it just wither and die?
Well, I have to tell all the bad news, I think, but it's not that black on this side of the world. First of all, like these entrepreneurs who are willing to do this business, they get the first money from family, friends. We also call the third one fools, right? Like they collect this money to bootstrap themselves, to bring their business to some level. But of course, like if they try everything and they don't have the funding, they die. But I will also emphasize, funding is not the only thing that they are looking for. As I just mentioned, it's really important for them to have these network, the mentors, the partners. They need this support because I've also seen many startups that have the funding and they spend this money very recklessly. And they don't have, like, they don't project what might be the risks that are coming up and stuff. And they don't have that experience maybe in some areas. And they also kill their startups. So I would say money is not like really what is killing a startup. Like they need connections, they need mentorship. It's same for students, right? These students are going to incubation programs. They are coming up with brilliant ideas. I've even met some high school students. But then if there is no experienced people on the way to support them, it might be incubators, accelerators, it doesn't matter. It's not only money. Then they die on the way, either lack of money, but mostly lack of experience or guidance that will provide them this.
Thank you. And I just want to talk about, ask Rebecca here about the role of advisors. A startup needs a body of advisors, I think, to hold their hands as they go through the process. Can you say a few words about that? But before you do, since I wasn't able to properly introduce you, could you just say a few words about yourself so the audience knows?
Yeah, okay. So I've got a master's in international law from the university in Leiden in the Netherlands. I liked having that law background because you are taught to argue the plus side and also the minus side, which is always good also when you're fundraising. If someone says it's very highly priced, you've got your arguments. If someone says it seems too cheaply priced. Then I spent my whole career on the fundraising side, originally on the trading floor at Salomon Brothers in the mid-90s in London, selling equities to the pension funds, and did that for a couple of other banks like JP Morgan, Bear Stearns, and Robertson Stephens, where I focused on technology and biotech specialist sales. 2003, set up Alphabet Capital Advisors, focusing on raising mainly growth capital. And to hook in on the previous discussion, if they haven't run out of money and they've been well coached, then the next stage is growth capital. And that not always goes smoothly, because I get companies coming to me that want to go out pitching and think what worked with the high net worth individuals will also work with the institutions. And they get quite a shock at that point, how much documentation is required by the I call them institutional investors, but really a lot of family offices I would also put in that same category. So they really need to prepare before they go out to the next league of investors, and some might die at that stage, unfortunately, but some manage to make that transition and become hugely successful, raise a ton of money, and then list on the stock exchange.
Thank you very much. Just one last question on this topic of funding before we move on. Are there startups here that are funded from outside the UAE? Is it possible to link up innovators here with sources of funding outside? And how does one do that?
We have startups from all around the world. Like, our program is open to any startup. They don't have to be only from UAE. And we have some teams that are coming from abroad. We just finished our first batch with 10 startups. They are graduated in February. And some of them right now are in their home countries looking for funding. And they started their journey throughout the program. They start to contact angel investment networks, VCs here, but same in their country as well. And anywhere, basically, that they have reached or connection, they will try to chase all these investors so that they can close their coming round. So it's not only UAE, like an entrepreneur should have to find a way that where they can get it as soon as possible. I can say from our alumni, they are chasing funding from anywhere. That's going to help them, like, in the long run, if they are running their operations, for example, in these home countries, it's also important that, they have solid funding there, and then if they can find another investor that can match this investment from here as well, then it's amazing, because then they can also run their operations in the UAE as well.
Thanks. We'll just move on from funding, although we'll never be able to escape funding, at least during this session. I'd like to talk a little bit about talent acquisition. And we've talked about 200 plus nationalities here. Is it still, I'd like to pose this to Sanjeev Dixit, is it still possible here to find the right person for the right job when you're talking about the startup environment?
I think in terms of the quality of talent which is available here, and because of the kind of universities and the kind of education setup which is coming up, I think it's improving in terms of the right fit for a startup or even a traditional FMCG or a FMCD company. But the only thing, I think the important part is the kind of mindset which is being oriented to these students, which is more towards their attitude towards innovation. Because most of the time, the kind of design of the curriculum or the kind of pedagogy of the universities out here, or even the experience per se, you don't have that kind of a bent to work in a startup or a very, very innovative, innovation-driven companies. And I think that's where the kind of, I will say, behaviors or the kind of belief system you inculcate in the budding student who are going to be the budding managers in different kind of startup companies, I think that's the key. In order to sustain this scalability of, I will say, your startup companies, or for that matter, any kind of organization.
Yeah, thank you. I just, on this same subject, I have this distinct feeling that out here there's probably not the same kind of culture that exists in the United States, for example, where people out of university are willing to take a very low salary or no salary, but take maybe a stake in the startup, right? Take a stake in the startup for a promise of a better future, right? But here, we've got this culture, I think, of you must work, you must get a salary, you must be employed, you must 9 to 5. And that goes for university students graduating as well. So how does one overcome this? How does one get people to take a risk at an early stage in their lives?
I think we need to give the perspective with reference to which universities are working. There has been a paradigm shift from input-centric teaching model to output-based education in the last 15 to 20 years. And if you look at the graduate attributes, we measure the success of the graduation through a couple of tangible parameters like employability or fitment to the industry requirements, and second one is about their suitability for higher education. But in the recent years, we have seen a distinct possibility that at least a small percentage of the students are also interested in the entrepreneurial ventures. So we need to somehow infuse this element of outcome orientation towards innovation and entrepreneurial journey to make sure that the talent which is already there in the university can march towards the startup models.
Would you like to say something on that, Sanjeev?
I think the most critical part I see as a person who's sitting on the other side of the table as a corporate guy and looking for the right talent, especially from the context of innovation and sustainability, I think the kind of value system we are now inculcating in the education institution. If the objective and the belief of the education institution is to churn out number of students or number of, say, qualified people, I think that's not the only objective they should have. I think the objective is, that, as an institution, am I creating that kind of a belief system or the kind of people who have that kind of a mindset, who can be a good fit in a very, very, I will say, VUCA environment of the kind of organization, whether it is startup or any kind of organization. And number two, scalability. I think, do they have that mindset of scale up, make the idea or even for that matter, any kind of thought into a scalable, you can say, a work. I think that's the key.
So what you're saying is that I think universities have to play a role in this.
Very critical
by
role,
preparing students for these non-traditional roles
Absolutely.
in startups. So when you have a graduating class and you say, oh, he got into IBM, she got into Microsoft,
Yeah.
and then that poor guy got into a startup, and he's not taking any salary.
not a poor guy,
That shouldn't be how it. That's not how it should be, right?
Absolutely.
It should be, well, he's probably better off than those other guys who've gone into the traditional
Absolutely.
areas. But how does one do that in the university systems that we have today? You know, because everyone's geared towards that sort of job, as we talked about earlier this morning.
Thanks for this question. We can observe this like too much through our startups because they are looking for talents, right? And they don't have that budget to pay thousands of euros or dirhams per month to fresh graduates. I think one of the important paradigm shift might be here when the students at universities see other friends of theirs that are working in startups, who are the pioneers, I will say, because they are the risk takers and they don't care if the other friend is working in IBM or Coca-Cola, but they take this risk and they go there. And then when the others are seeing them, oh, you're working more flexibly, you are creating something amazing, and you are, okay, paid less than me, but you're doing something very cool. I think right now in this generation, this image of like, okay, I graduated from this amazing university and I'm gonna work in a corporate, no, this is changing. And I think the key here, they see how cool this is, and this is also like media, all the PR coverages, they see like, you know, young talents at the age of 20, they are building these companies, and they also get impressed by the fact that they're getting 1 million of funding, right? And they see, wow, like there are these things out there that I can do instead of working in a corporate. I'm not saying that work in the corporate is a bad thing, but like to attract more talent through the young ages, this is one of the important things. Like if they can see that the others are like doing amazing stuff, then they want to be part of it. Another part, we are as Accelerator in our case, but I mean, even in VC's portfolio companies, we are really putting an effort to push our startups. Hey, like there are these universities, they come to us and they ask, hey, like we are looking for a marketing manager, we are looking for an ops assistant, what can we do? And we are saying there are all these universities, right? Like you don't have to look for a super experienced person, you can take them and they train them. And actually the learning curve in a startup is so amazing. I mean, you can learn anything because you are hands-on working. Like if you're in a corporate, maybe it will take you to change from one position to another 2-3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe a lifetime. But in a startup, you get this skill set that is like so amazing for them. So I mean, I agree that universities, all the like educational institutions has a role in this. And the last thing that I should mention is also the parents. I still see interns that are from universities. They come and talk to me and they're like, yeah, you know, like I'm doing this internship in Coca-Cola, I did in Vodafone. I really want to be part of a startup, but my parents think that I'm paid well in Coca-Cola. This is a great opportunity for me. And when they go and try to explain what they are doing in a startup, I mean, seriously, even my parents are not like aware what I'm doing right now. They're like, so you're in investment? Yeah, okay, yes, it's fine. They don't understand. And you can see this gap between these generations, and it's normal. Like, we can criticize, but I think if I will be in educational institutions, I will also try to play on parents. Like, invite them to some meetings, hey, like, these are the new career opportunities. You can see in like World Economic Forum reports, right? The industry and everything is changing. In 10 years, these classic jobs will not exist anymore. So I think this is also another responsibility of the educational institutions to also educate the parents, not only the students.
Very good point. Oh, you want to say something?
Yeah, I really think you made some very good points. And also, I think the pension fund system is important in that context because, for example, when I left the big banks and decided I was going to set up my own firm, I had the same thing. My parents, they called my uncle, could you please go and talk to our daughter? You know, we don't know what she's doing. And they very much came from the idea you're supposed to work for a company, you get a pension later on. So they were very worried what was going to happen to me later on. And I think as we see the pension system becoming more of an issue, it's no longer also employment for life. This is all going to change. But we're in the transit generation, I would say.
Very true. And one point I'd like to make is that there's a certain mindset needed to work in a startup. Now, for example, I could never work in a startup because I'm trained in the traditional corporate way in the past. So how do you find talent here? For example, in the US, you have companies like Flatiron and General Assembly that actually provide vocational training for startups, right? For example, I know for a fact Uber, when it started here, brought in people from outside. They didn't recruit people here. Look, I'm talking about at the management level. So is there talent available here, and how does one find it?
So in my view, I think there are two set of talent. One is the very, I will say, fresh from the universities with that kind of, I will say, emphasis that they want to experiment and they want to take up roles in the startups, companies. Those are young gens or okay, Gen Zs. And there is a good lot of people who are very, very senior guys, experienced, who are almost kind of retired, and we can call them the interim managers. And they are the guys who can come on a part-time basis for any kind of a startup or a new venture organization and work on a particular project, set it up, and then move on. So I think that kind of a talent, I think, needs to be tapped, which is readily available. Seasoned guys and experience across various specialized areas. We, in our organization as well, keep looking for if there are some kind of, say, a very specialized project which needs to be taken care by an interim manager who's just coming for 6 months, taking it to a next level, and then we hire a permanent guy and who can then scale it up.
But won't you have a sort of a clash of civilizations, as it were, because you're going to have even an interim manager, semi-retired, whatever, with traditional sort of a mindset, and then with this disruptive group who are running the show, everybody probably under the age of 25 or something. How does that, I mean, how will that match?
It works well because these interim managers, because of their experience, are very mature to handle such kind of a very, very, I will say, complex or a very vulnerable situation. And they also act as a coach while they take that project to the next level. They act as a coach and pass on that entire, what you call, learning and experience to these new bunch of guys. And I think that's where we have seen a very, very effective transition of these interim managers taking that project, coaching that, what you call, young people who can take up the, you can say, the entire project on a scalable manner, and then they move on to another project. So I think we need to, as I said, shift our entire talent strategy in terms of what works well in context to that particular, say, startup or that organization. So it could be a good mix of both, in my view, and it works very, very well.
Thank you. And now coming to, now coming to the final point, let's just summarize the whole startup ecosystem here. I'd just like each of you to say just a couple of words on that. so the audience can get a feel for what you think where the ecosystem is headed. That's more important than what it is today. Is it more like something like, Y Combinator, in the US, where people like, who's that? Airbnb started out, things like that. Is that ever going to happen here?
I think startups today should feel really, really lucky. After all the funding that was done around 2000, it's actually so easy now to run a business. You've got all the technology, you've got Skype and so on. That didn't exist before the businesses were funded in 2000. So they're in a very good environment. And also there are many accelerators around, and there are many also from the older generation that can bring in their expertise. So I would say it's a great environment they're setting up in now.
I very much agree. I also want to use the word innovation. We're working also with corporates, right? So right now, in this age, even the corporates are really looking forward to getting entrepreneurs that can work with them. We are bringing our corporate partners, employees, to work with our startups. This didn't exist from, 10 years ago, probably, no way. Right now, as also the corporates, the huge giants are very aware of the fact that if they don't get these startups on board somehow, or they don't work together, they're gonna be disrupted and lose their businesses in very short years. So for that reason, I think UAE in general is a great place. Funding-wise, it takes time, right, to bring more institutions, government funding, private equities, and all this stuff. But I can say for entrepreneurs, they are super lucky. As we had previous presentation, there are all these online courses. They can learn anything. I also want to mention one more thing, as I can see from the audience. There are not many students here. We also make experienced people great entrepreneurs as well. I just read a report last week, and the statistics in this report, the most successful entrepreneurs are the age between 35 to 45. Actually, if you look at the success rates, you can be an amazing entrepreneur by using your experience if you can really collaborate with the mindset of a young entrepreneur. Because we have our mentors that are from different industries, and they are very experienced. But what we face when they are mentoring our startups, they are so risk-averse. They are like, yeah, did you think about this? But what about that? But a startup does not have a chance to wait for 6 months or a year to just think about, okay, now I'm pretty sure that I can apply that. No, they have to fail fast, learn fast, and this environment is a perfect place for them to grow. Same with the educational institutions. They can go to their professors, get mentorship. They have everything. So in this environment, I have no excuse. I see no excuse for any entrepreneur to fail. They have all the resources available, including funding institutions and educational institutions. So what else they can need?
I just would like to give a small technology perspective to this answer. So in the recent times, the startup ecosystem connected with drones or unmanned air vehicles, it's been on the upswing. Lots of young people got into that just because of the glamour associated with this domain. And all that these companies started doing is take a quadcopter, do small modifications, make it fly, and get the aerial imagery. But very quickly they realized that there is no technology connected in terms of enhancing let's say, the battery life, or control navigation systems, or one-touch flight control systems. Then what happened? More or less everybody started competing, say, in the same service domain, wherein you are doing some high-value photography or aerial imagery corresponding to either urban system or precision agriculture. And they missed the bus in terms of ramping up just because they could not do investments on technology development. So I feel that whenever we are talking about areas like either IoT or data analytics or unmanned air vehicles, for that matter, 3D printing, where there are global estimates saying that there is going to be multi-billion-dollar market unfolding, these new startup companies have to be sensitive to the technology development alongside of the funding and the networking.
Thank you.
Yeah. While the ecosystem has various constituents, like you have university, education institution, you have the funding, what you call capitalist, and the startup itself. I think the key piece is, while you have all these semantics happening around, in terms of, we call it artificial intelligence, we call it all the technology, 3D technology which is coming in, I think the key element is the kind of mindset which is being created in this entire ecosystem, which is primarily looking at I will say, intuitive intelligence, which is more governed by the way we use our intuitions to take up any particular type of, you can say, startup or any kind of organization to the next level. I think that intelligence is very, very important. And another AI, I will call it, is your attitude towards innovation. I think that AI is the most key, rather than the artificial intelligence, in my view.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I learned a lot from listening to you, and this must be one of the first historical occasions when the entire panel seemed to be in complete agreement with each other, which may be a good thing or a bad thing. We should get together for a great game of bridge or something. But anyway, thank you very much for your thoughts, and I'll hand it over to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you.